The exception regarding repair garages for watercraft, four-wheelers, and motorcycles is found in the 2002 National Electrical Code, specifically Article 511.44. This section explicitly states that Article 511, which deals with commercial garages, does not apply to repair garages for watercraft, four-wheelers, or motorcycles. This exception was introduced in the 2002 edition of the NEC and is grounded in several key criteria. Firstly, these types of repair garages are generally small, single-story structures with open interior spaces. Secondly, they typically do not store large quantities of flammable liquids or gases. Thirdly, the work conducted in these garages mainly involves repairs and maintenance, which does not usually produce significant amounts of flammable vapors. Given these characteristics, the NEC generally does not mandate that these buildings be classified as Class 1, Division 2 hazardous locations. However, it is crucial to understand the limitations of this exception. If such a building is used for storing substantial quantities of flammable liquids or gases, or if the work performed within generates a significant volume of flammable vapors, then the NEC may indeed require classification as a Class 1, Division 2 hazardous location. It is important to remember that the National Electrical Code is a comprehensive set of standards designed to ensure electrical safety. The NEC is updated regularly to reflect changes in technology and best practices. The purpose of classifying areas as hazardous locations is to mitigate the risk of fire or explosion due to the presence of flammable substances. Class 1 locations are those where flammable gases or vapors are, or may be, present in the air in quantities sufficient to produce explosive or ignitable mixtures. Division 1 locations are those where hazardous concentrations of flammable gases or vapors exist continuously, intermittently, or periodically under normal operating conditions. Division 2 locations are those where hazardous concentrations of flammable gases or vapors are present only under abnormal conditions such as accidental rupture or breakdown of containment equipment. Article 511 of the NEC addresses specific requirements for commercial garages, including those related to wiring, equipment, and ventilation in hazardous locations. The exception for watercraft, four-wheelers, and motorcycle repair garages acknowledges that the risks in these facilities are typically lower than in traditional commercial garages. However, it is essential to conduct a thorough hazard assessment to determine whether the exception applies in a specific situation. Factors to consider include the types and quantities of flammable liquids or gases present, the ventilation system, and the types of work being performed. If the hazard assessment indicates that there is a significant risk of fire or explosion, then the area should be classified as a Class 1, Division 2 hazardous location, and all applicable requirements of the NEC must be followed. These requirements may include the use of explosion-proof electrical equipment, proper ventilation, and restrictions on the use of open flames. It is also important to consult with local authorities and insurance providers to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations. Remember that the NEC is a minimum standard and local authorities may have additional requirements. In summary, the NEC provides an exception for watercraft, four-wheelers, and motorcycle repair garages because they typically present a lower risk of fire or explosion than traditional commercial garages. However, this exception is not absolute, and a hazard assessment must be conducted to determine whether the area should be classified as a Class 1, Division 2 hazardous location. When in doubt, it is always best to err on the side of caution and follow the more stringent requirements of the NEC. The NEC, or National Electrical Code, is a regionally adoptable standard for the safe installation of electrical wiring and equipment in the United States. It is part of the National Fire Code series published by the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA. While not itself a law, the NEC is commonly adopted by states and municipalities in an effort to standardize safe electrical practices. The NEC contains specific requirements for various types of occupancies and locations, including hazardous locations. Hazardous locations are defined as areas where fire or explosion hazards may exist due to flammable gases, vapors, liquids, dusts, or fibers. These locations are classified according to the type and frequency of the hazard, with Class 1 locations involving flammable gases or vapors. Class 1 locations are further divided into Divisions 1 and 2, as previously described. The NEC provides detailed requirements for electrical equipment and wiring in hazardous locations, including the use of explosion-proof enclosures, intrinsically safe circuits, and other measures to prevent ignition. The purpose of these requirements is to minimize the risk of fire or explosion in areas where flammable substances are present. It is important to note that the NEC is not a design manual. It provides minimum safety requirements, but it does not provide detailed instructions on how to design an electrical system. Electrical system design is the responsibility of qualified electrical engineers and designers who are familiar with the NEC and other applicable standards. In addition to the NEC, other codes and standards may apply to electrical installations in specific types of facilities. For example, the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA, also publishes standards for fire protection in various types of occupancies such as healthcare facilities, laboratories, and industrial plants. These standards may contain additional requirements for electrical safety. It is essential to consult all applicable codes and standards when designing and installing electrical systems. It is also important to stay up to date on the latest editions of these codes and standards, as they are updated regularly to reflect changes in technology and best practices. Proper installation and maintenance of electrical systems are crucial for preventing electrical hazards such as fires, shocks, and electrocution. Only qualified electricians should perform electrical work. It is also important to have electrical systems inspected regularly to identify any potential problems. By following the requirements of the NEC and other applicable codes and standards, and by ensuring that electrical work is performed by qualified professionals, it is possible to create safe and reliable electrical systems. In the context of the question, the classification of the retail store with an all-terrain vehicle and boat service area as a Class 1, Division 2 hazardous location depends on several factors, including the types and quantities of flammable liquids or gases present, the ventilation system, and the types of work being performed. While the exception in Article 511.44 of the NEC may apply, it is essential to conduct a thorough hazard assessment to determine whether the area should be classified as a hazardous location. If the hazard assessment indicates that there is a significant risk of fire or explosion, then the area should be classified accordingly, and all applicable requirements of the NEC must be followed. Ultimately, the goal is to ensure the safety of employees, customers, and the public. This requires a comprehensive approach to electrical safety, including proper design, installation, maintenance, and adherence to all applicable codes and standards. Remember that the information provided here is for general guidance only and should not be considered a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with qualified electrical engineers and designers to ensure that electrical systems are designed and installed in accordance with all applicable codes and standards. The NEC, Article 511, covers commercial garages, which are defined as buildings or portions of buildings used for the storage, servicing, and repair of self-propelled vehicles, including automobiles, trucks, and buses. The article addresses the electrical wiring and equipment in these garages, with a particular focus on hazardous locations. As previously mentioned, hazardous locations are areas where fire or explosion hazards may exist due to flammable gases, vapors, liquids, dusts, or fibers. In commercial garages, flammable liquids such as gasoline and motor oil are commonly used, which can create hazardous conditions. Article 511 divides commercial garages into different classes and divisions depending on the likelihood of flammable substances being present. Class 1 locations are those where flammable gases or vapors are, or may be, present in the air in quantities sufficient to produce explosive or ignitable mixtures. Division 1 locations are those where hazardous concentrations of flammable gases or vapors exist continuously, intermittently, or periodically under normal operating conditions. Division 2 locations are those where hazardous concentrations of flammable gases or vapors are present only under abnormal conditions, such as accidental rupture or breakdown of containment equipment. The NEC provides specific requirements for electrical equipment and wiring in each of these classes and divisions. These requirements are designed to minimize the risk of ignition in hazardous locations. For example, explosion-proof electrical equipment is required in Class 1, Division 1 locations. Explosion-proof equipment is designed to contain any internal explosion and prevent it from propagating to the surrounding atmosphere. Intrinsically safe circuits are also permitted in some hazardous locations. Intrinsically safe circuits are designed to limit the amount of energy available so that it is not sufficient to ignite a flammable mixture. In addition to the requirements for electrical equipment and wiring, Article 511 also addresses ventilation requirements for commercial garages. Proper ventilation is essential for removing flammable vapors from the air and preventing them from accumulating to hazardous concentrations. The NEC specifies minimum ventilation rates for different types of garages. It also requires that ventilation systems be designed to prevent the recirculation of contaminated air. The exception in Article 511.4 for watercraft, four-wheelers, and motorcycle repair garages recognizes that these facilities typically present a lower risk of fire or explosion than traditional commercial garages. This is because they are typically smaller, have better ventilation, and do not store large quantities of flammable liquids. However, it is important to note that this exception is not absolute. If a watercraft, four-wheeler, or motorcycle repair garage does store large quantities of flammable liquids or has poor ventilation, it may still need to be classified as a hazardous location. In such cases, the requirements of Article 511 would apply. It is also important to consider the specific activities that are performed in the repair garage. If the activities involve the use of flammable liquids such as gasoline or solvents, then the area may need to be classified as a hazardous location, even if the quantity of flammable liquid stored is relatively small. For example, if a repair garage is used for spray painting, the area where the spray painting is performed would likely need to be classified as a Class 1, Division 1 location. The NEC provides detailed guidance on how to classify hazardous locations based on the specific conditions and activities in a facility. It is important to consult with qualified electrical engineers and designers to ensure that hazardous locations are properly classified and that all applicable requirements of the NEC are followed. In addition to Article 511, other articles of the NEC may also apply to electrical installations in commercial garages and repair facilities. For example, Article 514 covers gasoline dispensing and service stations. This article provides specific requirements for electrical equipment and wiring in areas where gasoline is dispensed, such as fuel pumps and dispensing islands. Article 513 covers aircraft hangars. This article provides specific requirements for electrical equipment and wiring in areas where aircraft are stored or serviced. It is important to consult all applicable articles of the NEC when designing and installing electrical systems in commercial garages and repair facilities. The NEC is a complex and comprehensive document, and it is essential to have a thorough understanding of its requirements to ensure electrical safety. The proper classification of hazardous locations is critical for preventing fires and explosions. By following the requirements of the NEC and consulting with qualified professionals, it is possible to create safe and reliable electrical systems in commercial garages and repair facilities. Always remember that the NEC represents minimum safety standards, and additional precautions may be necessary to address specific hazards. Regular inspections and maintenance of electrical systems are essential for identifying and correcting potential problems before they lead to accidents. Ongoing training for employees who work with electrical equipment is also important. By taking a proactive approach to electrical safety, it is possible to minimize the risk of electrical hazards and protect lives and property. The authority having jurisdiction, or OJ, is responsible for enforcing the NEC. The AHJ may be a local building inspector, a fire marshal, or another official with the authority to interpret and enforce the code. It is important to work closely with the AHJ to ensure that electrical installations comply with all applicable requirements. The AHJ can provide guidance on the proper classification of hazardous locations and the selection of appropriate electrical equipment. The AHJ can also conduct inspections to verify that electrical installations are in compliance with the NEC. The NEC is a living document that is updated every 3 years. It is important to stay up to date on the latest edition of the NEC to ensure that electrical installations are in compliance with current standards. The NFPA offers a variety of training and educational resources on the NEC. These resources can help electrical professionals stay up to date on the latest code requirements and best practices. By investing in training and education, electrical professionals can improve their knowledge and skills and help to ensure electrical safety. In conclusion, the classification of the retail store with an all-terrain vehicle and boat service area as a Class 1, Division 2 hazardous location depends on a variety of factors. While the exception in Article 511.44 of the NEC may apply, it is essential to conduct a thorough hazard assessment to determine whether the area should be classified as a hazardous location. If the hazard assessment indicates that there is a significant risk of fire or explosion, then the area should be classified accordingly, and all applicable requirements of the NEC must be followed. Remember to consult all applicable codes and standards, work closely with the authority having jurisdiction, and stay up to date on the latest edition of the NEC. By taking a comprehensive approach to electrical safety, it is possible to minimize the risk of electrical hazards and protect lives and property.